Hello and welcome to this video talking about sacrifice. I guess it could be for sport, it could be for sacrifice for success really. Any kind of pursuit that takes a lot of time and effort, this video will be applicable for. So this is just in response to my previous video on the 1% gains you can make. Got a lot of good feedback from that. People seem to like the fact that it was quite not scientific, so I'm going to try and stick to that, which is against my nature, but I don't think I like to make it maybe too scientific. But there you go, and that's absolutely fine. I don't mind that. That will help me out a lot as well. So, also I've got Wi-Fi in my flat, so I can actually make videos now a bit more frequently. So the podcast reviews will come back as well. So we're going to talk about sacrifice. So the first thing is to just think of this. I'm sure you've probably heard this analogy of kind of pebbles in a beaker or pebbles in a cup, or you know, and the beaker is kind of reminiscent of a day, of one day's work, we'll say. The big pebbles, or the rocks, these big ones, are things that you have to do, you know, things that you can't get around. So going to work, sleeping, obviously, eating, all that stuff, day-to-day stuff that, you know, you need to do regardless just to survive. The smaller things will be the smaller things for me, if in this scenario, are optional things that include training, optional things, you know, be it socializing, playing, you know, PlayStation, training, tidying up, the stuff that, you know, you don't have to do and you'll still survive, but the stuff that we think is important, the kind of passions really. And then the small little ones are even more micro level than that. That's, for me, that represents kind of added time that we waste, really. But you can look at this in many different ways. You can look at this in, they're just levels of the things that we need to do. So, for example, we can't really move the big ones. They have to be there. We can replace some of the smaller ones, and then the tiny pebbles, the tiny ones, we can better utilize our time with. So what I'm trying to get at here with the sacrifice is, it's not similar to the 1% video. None of us are pro athletes. Most of us are trying to get better at our sport, but that's to different levels. So some of us, and I'll use personal examples here as well, some of us will want to give everything to the sport. So personally, I don't mind missing out on everything, friends-wise. Don't really care, never have. I think being introverted really helps that. But for me, you know, missing out on parties and stuff and not getting invited to things anymore, I don't sleep anyway, so I'm not going to lose sleep about that. But for some people, obviously that's more important, and that's absolutely fine. And if anything, from experience, those people tend to be a lot happier anyway. A lot happier than, me, I guess, but a lot happier than people who are on the opposite spectrum, and people who are maybe too into their sport, and if they can't handle that, a certain personality can, but not everyone can. But all I'm trying to say with this is similar to the 1% thing, is that with sacrifice, similar to the 1% work you do outside of the gym, it really depends on what your goal is. So the issue comes when there's some cognitive dissonance, there's some kind of disparity in your goal and what you think will get you to your goal. So if your goal is, I want to become Olympic champion, but all you're doing is, partying all weekend, drinking loads, not sleeping at all, and you still think that's okay, then obviously you're going to be disappointed very quickly. If your goal is to be happy and do what you want, and you don't really mind if weightlifting suffers or the sport suffers, then that's absolutely fine. No one's going to judge you for that. I think the issue comes when people want the best thing in the world, this kind of, an Olympic medal or something, but then they're not willing to sacrifice anything for it. So with the pebbles, and then similarly, so I've known a couple of people who I started when I started weightlifting, were just happy. They just wanted to do weightlifting. So these pebbles, if weightlifting, say, is one of these kind of smaller ones, session maybe takes 2 hours, 3 hours. Longest session I've ever done is maybe 4 hours. It sounds like a long time, but 4 hours is about 16% of your day, I think. It's about 16% of your day. Someone will correct me on that, I'm sure, but even if you've got this incredibly long session, there's still time to do other stuff. So don't be tricked into thinking that if you do weightlifting, you can't do anything else. You absolutely can. It's just for optimal performance, it might not be optimal. If your goal is to live the most balanced lifestyle possible, in the sense that you want to socialize, you want to have a laugh, you want to do training, do it. Absolutely fine. Do it, please. Absolutely fine. No one minds. I think the issue becomes if you start trying to make these smaller pebbles or these medium pebbles into the biggest rocks, and that's where kind of an imbalance occurs. So some examples of possible sacrifice that you could. I've asked around a few people. So training itself is the sacrifice that takes a lot of time. A lot of times people, I don't know if this is because people work, throughout the week, but I don't know if this is just a Western world thing as well, where we have our heaviest sessions, on a Friday or a Saturday night. So Friday night or Saturday, let's say. Now, that's great, probably because you want to get it as far away from work as possible, so you can be as most recovered as possible. You don't have to stress about anything. It's a weekend, everything's a bit better. But obviously then you miss 3 hours on a weekend that you could be spending with your family. And that's a sacrifice in itself. Similarly, recovery, real tough session, you just want to get back and sleep. That's another hour gone to family, to loved ones. Traveling there, if you're traveling to the gym, it could be another hour out of your day. And then things like planning. So the example that the person gave was planning the week of training, and then meal prep as well, I think goes into that. It's just more time spent in pursuit of this goal, which ultimately, it's another point, whether we're trying to lift weights over our head or whether we're trying to, shot put's a good example. It's like such an arbitrary sport. Like all you're doing is just throwing a cannonball as far as you can. In the grand scheme of things, like it kind of means nothing. It's the same with weightlifting. No one cares about how, maybe if you're Lasher, people care, but you have to understand that no one cares about, when I say no one, I mean getting the wider world. Obviously weightlifters care a lot, and that's why it's good. But the wider world doesn't care about your, 1.4 times bodyweight snatch, for me, for example. But we care, and that's what makes it our passion. So we care a lot about this semi kind of arbitrary thing because it's a passion, it makes us happy. But this is kind of leads into what I'm going to talk about, but I don't want to talk about my dissertation because it was a raging success, but it was a long time ago. My dissertation was on passion in weightlifters, basically, and they all understood that it was kind of an arbitrary value, but they decided to sacrifice a lot to it because it's their passion. So if I would fully agree with just chase whatever your passion is. If your passion is playing, I don't know the terms, but playing PlayStation, then do that. Absolutely fine. If your passion is going out and partying, then do that. Absolutely fine. If your passion is trying to live like a monk and just training and doing nothing else, then please do that. Please do that. They're all as unhealthy as each other when we're talking about. As soon as passion becomes obsession, regardless of if you're drinking, taking drugs, or living the most healthy lifestyle you can think of, it's all unhealthy when it gets to the extremes. If it makes you happy, then fair enough. But just be aware that it is unhealthy depending on the level of obsession you have towards it. So let's just talk about some of the sacrifices quickly. So the best way I think to think about this is short-term pain for long-term success. So maybe you're doing an Olympic cycle, you've got 4 years, or how much, if you're young now, 20, early 20s, what most of the people listening to this will be, what's 3 years of your life really? What's 4 years of your life? That's in my opinion. If you can put everything towards said goal, you might not get Olympic medal in 4 years. In fact, you probably won't. but you'll be way further ahead, and your life will probably change for the better, or new opportunities will arise because of that. So I think I'm quite a good example. Was that when I started, within a few years, I was at national level for juniors for weightlifting, and then with, let's say, 3 or 4 years, it then became my job, and then that became my passion. So coaching. So I went from kind of nothing to putting everything into it for 3 or 4 years, and then it becoming my job, and it changed my life. And it's only 3 years. It's only 3 years gone. Grand scheme of things. If I end up living to be 80, 90, it's not that long really. Obviously it's not as simple as that in a lot of ways. Obviously it was hard for most of it, but trying to think about long term rather than short term. And that's the essence of sacrifice, isn't it? Like, don't get me wrong, I want to eat cheesecake every day, every meal, because it tastes unreal. Short term. Long term, I'll probably throw up, I'll feel sick, my training will go to hell, and then my mental health will go to hell. So it's just about thinking about a short term kind of sacrifice for a long term goal. But a lot of things that came up when I asked people about this, and in my dissertation, was that everyone suggested that there was some form of social rejection. Whether that's loss of time, like we mentioned earlier, so loss of time if you're traveling to the gym and training, that's time that you could be spent, with your loved ones. Now, true people who really love you will be okay with that. They understand that it's your passion, it's what makes you happy. They'll allow you to chase it. Try to be wary of the people who try and force you not to be, in my experience. But also relationships may suffer. So I've had this not many times, but once or twice I've had people fall out with me because of not being able to spend time with them. I think this is more a case of closer relationships than just friends. I think I've never had an issue with friends, being disappointed. Like, maybe they were, but you'll find out quite quickly who your friends are, but also you'll find out quite quickly that I think most of your friends are fine. They'll be okay with it. As long as, if you're really friends, you'll stay friends regardless. And they have their passions as well, most of the time, so that you don't want to do. So just be your own person, really. And that's the reason they're meant to like you or love you. So stick true to yourself, and that'll show itself. We've got here number 3, mentally draining. So training is hard. It's mentally draining. I think weightlifting is probably the hardest sport in the world. I think triple jump's up there, but I think in terms of the amount of time where training is bad objectively, it's just going terribly. You know that because you're not lifting the numbers. Whereas in triple jump, you can feel like you're jumping as far as you can if you just don't measure it. And don't tell me about, I don't know what weight's on the bar. You always know what weight's on the bar. So objectively, you do know if training is going badly. But because it's so mentally draining, you have to understand that other things might suffer. So work might suffer because you're tired, other hobbies might go to hell because you've got no time and energy for it. And that's fine, that's okay. Try and find the balance. I might make a second video about trying to find the balance, but in terms of just being aware that is the case, that you might give everything to weightlifting, but then it doesn't necessarily mean you can give everything to something else. So give the amount that you want to give. And then finally, prioritize the happy life. So prioritize finding the balance for you. So the balance for me might look very different from the balance to someone else. And again, that's okay. I'll make a second video about this, where we talk about this in a little bit more detail. But prioritize the happy life, because happy athlete usually equals better athlete. So if an athlete is unbelievably upset all the time, they're not going to perform as well as just a happy, well-functioning athlete. If anyone has any questions, let me know. I'm going to make a second video explaining more strategies for it. But have a wonderful day.